Hello, everyone. I'm Jeannie Godula. This is Inside the Americas. Coming up, as the football world continues to mourn the death of the legendary Diego Maradona, we'll take you back to look at the very beginnings of his career. Then, a promise of dialogue between artists and the government in Cuba stalled. On the way, a look at the San Isidro movement fighting for freedom of expression. And you'll meet a group of Black American cowboys fighting to take back their rightful place in U.S. history. First, though, it was another action-packed week in Washington. And while Donald Trump may still be saying the U.S. presidential election was rigged, one of his most faithful supporters disagreed. U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr says he has seen no widespread fraud in the election that saw Joe Biden beat Trump. The president's team, though, rejecting his statement, saying the Department of Justice did not properly investigate the fraud. Before the election, Barr had repeated his boss's claims about voter fraud and mail-in ballots, in particular, not being secure. Meanwhile, the U.S. Justice Department is also investigating an alleged bribery scheme involving campaign donations to secure a presidential pardon. That comes as a report in the New York Times says President Trump has talked with advisors about whether to grant preemptive pardons to his children and to his personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. Trump has said he's worried a Biden Justice Department might seek revenge by targeting his three oldest children, Donald Jr., Eric, and Ivanka, and her husband, White House senior advisor, Jared Kushner. Joe Biden, meanwhile, moving forward with his staff picks. 4 of the 7 top communications roles at the White House will be filled by women of color. And this is the first time the entire senior White House communications team will be all female. Biden also named Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen as his Treasury Secretary nominee, with 3 other women to top economic posts. But despite Biden's efforts for a more diverse team, Jim Clyburn, the most senior Black member of Congress, is one of many voices demanding even more diversity at the top-level White House. That criticism highlighting the challenges still facing the Biden transition team. It's time now for our number of the week. This one, number 10. That, of course, is the jersey number for football icon Diego Maradona, who died last week in Argentina. France 24 sports editor Simon Harding went back to his birthplace to trace the roots of Maradona's incredible career.
Diego Maradona's love story with Argentina started here in Villa Fiorito, one of Buenos Aires' most modest suburbs. El Pibe d'Oro was born in this house. His childhood friend, Norberto, remembers a boy who just wanted to play football.
Juntarnos con todos los chicos acá en la calle, jugar a la pelota. Y era su sueño, jugar, llegar a ser profesional, no esto que llegó a ser. Él quería jugar profesionalmente como cualquier jugador y poder ayudar a su familia.
A dream that became reality at a club whose stadium now bears his name, Argentinian Juniors. 10 days before his 16th birthday, Maradona started his professional career, securing a new contract and house for him and his family.
Pero lo vi jugar en la cancha Racing contra Racing, Argentino Junior Racing, que nos pegó un baile.
Diego's fame transcends football. He etched himself into people's hearts because they could relate to him, a source of pride and aspiration for many fans, devastated by his death.
Extrañar, pero Diego no se va a morir nunca porque el que ama nunca olvida, acá en Nápoles, en todo el mundo, porque él donde estuvo dejó su granito de arena.
Maradona cemented his name in Argentinian folklore following his transfer to legendary club Boca Juniors in 1981. During one illustrious season at the Bombonera, Maradona danced around defenders, winning the national championship for Boca. He was never forgotten by the fans.
Diego es único a nivel mundial, digamos. Por eso quisimos rendirle este homenaje para que lo disfrute todo el pueblo de Boca. Es el astro máximo acá en Boca, es el corazón del hincha de Boca.
No tenemos palabras para agradecerle todo lo que hizo por nuestro país, porque en el mundo entero nos conocen por Diego.
Maradona would make successive record-breaking transfers to Europe, where he became a legend, but his heart would forever be in Argentina. Diego's bond with his country lived on until his very last breath. Diego!
Next now to Cuba, where a promise of dialogue between the government and artists calling for greater freedom of expression has been stalled. Holding those talks was one of the key parts of a deal reached last week after an extremely rare protest by artists outside the culture ministry. Our reporters found out more from the San Isidro movement, a Cuban group fighting for more freedom.
Jailed for insulting a police officer. Denis Solis, a young rapper, has become the symbol of censorship and political oppression in Cuba. His arrest has since triggered a wave of protest actions, and it began with this house in Havana, where several people barricaded themselves, declaring a hunger strike. Musicians, academics, but also journalists, they all belong to the San Isidro movement, a group advocating for civil liberties.
Creo que es un buen momento.
It's time for all Cubans to wake up and try to save our country.
After just 10 days, the police raided the house and removed the protesters, citing health violations related to the coronavirus. But the movement had already gained significant attention. A day later, more than 200 people staged a rare protest in favor of freedom of expression outside the culture ministry. In an unprecedented move, representatives from the crowd were invited to meet with the authorities.
30 people have just told them honestly what is happening to us. They're mistreating us, beating us. They listened carefully.
But the promise of further dialogue was short-lived. Cuba's state television releasing undated images of a high-profile member of the movement meeting with a former American diplomat. Now the country's president has been eager to promote the narrative of U.S. interference.
This is part of a strategy of unconventional war to try to overthrow the revolution. It's the last attempt by the Trumpistas and the anti-Cuban mafia to do so.
Activists have rejected the accusations, while several foreign governments have called for the release of Denis Solis. According to Human Rights Watch, last year, more than 1,000 people were arbitrarily detained in Cuba.
Now, when you think of your typical American cowboy, you imagine the hat, the stirrups, the horse, and chances are you probably see him as white. And yet, after the Civil War, as many as 1/3 of all cowboys were black. That reality, however, has been hidden, ignored, or overlooked in both American history books and pop culture. But a group of modern-day cowboys is trying to change just that.
With the boots, lasso, and hat, he looks the part. But as a black man, Maurice Wade doesn't quite match the American cowboy stereotype. Yet that's exactly what he is, on a ranch in Colorado. Growing up in the 1960s, his career in the great outdoors wasn't a given.
When I was growing up, all the movies we saw was Westerns. Okay, we always had Western movies. And all of my heroes have always been cowboys. I just saw white guys riding fast horses, and I figured that I'm gonna be the black guy to do it.
In fact, as this little-known museum in Denver, Colorado explains, almost 1/3 of cowboys were black during the conquest of the Wild West. Most were freed slaves who chose the tough job of herding cattle, which also embodied freedom. History, though, has mostly erased this reality.
Children saw white cowboys, so they never thought about a black cowboy. James Arthur Walker invented the Hollywood hop, where you are riding on a horse, you jump off the side, you land on the ground, and you jump back into the saddle again. Now that's in all cowboy movies. But no one knows that guy right there is the one who invented it.
Because in John Wayne country, Hollywood also played a hand in erasing the image of the black cowboy. As early as the 1930s, there were coloured westerns, as they were called at the time, but they were low-budget productions intended only for black cinemas in segregated America.
In the 1950s and 60s, during the height of segregation and the civil rights movement, network executives and movie studio heads, they didn't have the courage to put a black man on a horse and call him a hero when the rest of America was fighting over race. Probably the quintessential black Western would be Buck and the Preacher with Sidney Poitier and Harry Belafonte.
Today, a younger generation of African Americans is rediscovering the heritage of black cowboys. At just 12, Savannah Roberts has already won rodeo championship titles.
Myself out there to make sure that I make role models for the younger African Americans. I just want them to know that nobody can put you down. Like, nobody can tell you can't do this, you can't do that.
Her own role model, Charles Sampson, quietly made history in 1982.
Charlie Sampson.
When he became the first African American to win the World Rodeo Championship, an emblematic American sport.
Once America deal with their issue and understand that we're in the land of the free, we're equal, then race will not play a difference. So we're working on that as Americans.
In fields from political to scientific, it's white America that's written history. Today, the black cowboys want to reconquer the American West.
Well, winter is now upon us, and we will leave you with a look at some penguins in the very chilly city of Chicago. Their home in the Shed Aquarium may be closed due to the pandemic, but confinement has actually been quite busy for these birds. Since the beginning of the lockdown in March, the penguins have embarked on several field trips to local landmarks, including a recent visit to a football stadium and inside the aquarium's 4D theater. Their trainers say it's good to keep the birds stimulated, and videos of the penguins' adventures have circulated wildly on social media, much to the delight of fans around the world. We'll leave you with those pictures. Thanks so much for watching Inside the Americas. We will see you next time for all the news from north to south.
Culture Daily. Every day, France 24 fills you in on the latest in the world of culture. In your Encore magazine, meet the artists, get to know them and their work, watch them and listen to them talking about their creations and the era we live in. Stay up to date with all things cultural in France and around the world. Get your culture fix daily on France 24 and France24.com.